Welcome to episode number 219, where I'm speaking with Dr. Paul Dugliss about the role consciousness plays in our overall health and well-being, and we dive deeply into the chakra system. Dr. Dugliss tells us how the chakra system can really affect our mental and emotional programming, and how there's a correlation between the chakras and the endocrine system. Dr. Dugliss also gives us tips on how to nourish the chakras, so please stay tuned. Welcome to the Elements of Ayurveda podcast. I'm your host, Colette, and I hope to educate and empower you to take charge of your health and well-being, preventing disease in the body and mind so that you can thrive in life. I will be sharing the holistic teachings of Ayurveda, which is the ancient healing tradition from India. Now, if you're new to Ayurveda, I recommend listening to the first couple of episodes where I do an introduction to Ayurveda and the mind-body types. And if you like the content, please be sure to subscribe or follow the podcast so the new episodes will automatically download for you. Also, you may want to check out my private Elements community, which is away from social media. It's a safe space for like-minded people to come together, to connect, to share, to support each other, and to continue the conversation from the podcast episodes. Check out the link in the show notes or visit my website, elementshealingandwellbeing.com, and just click on the community tab. And I hope to connect with you there. Thanks for listening. And now here's a new episode. This episode is sponsored by Banyan Botanicals. You all know I'm a big fan of Banyan Botanicals Ayurvedic products. Today, I'm excited to share with you a new product, Ashwagandha Latte Mix. Ashwagandha is an adaptogenic herb, meaning it intelligently provides what your body needs most. You can enjoy this mix in the morning for a boost of energy, throughout the day, or even at night before bed. It's a creamy, nourishing, and utterly delicious way to support your holistic lifestyle. Ashwagandha Latte Mix is vegan and can be blended in your favorite milk. I love a warm, milky drink before bed, and I like to make it with oat milk. Banyan offers more products with ashwagandha, such as women's support, stress ease, and turmeric milk mix. And as a listener, you can save 20% off site-wide at banyanbotanicals.com/elements. That's www.banyan, B-A-N-Y-A-N, botanicals.com/elements, and you'll also find that link in the show notes. Hello and welcome back to the Elements of Ayurveda podcast. Today, I'm very happy to introduce you to Dr. Paul Dugliss, who is a pioneer in the American medical system, being one of the first physicians to integrate the ancient wisdom of Ayurveda into modern healthcare. He has written 7 books on Ayurveda and is a founding member of the National Council on Ayurvedic Education. He has traveled the world as a speaker and is regularly consulted as an expert on a variety of health and consciousness-related projects. Dr. Dugliss has devoted his life to bringing Ayurveda to the mainstream with the New World Ayurveda School and continues to bring to his students an ever-evolving understanding of what living as a conscious, whole person rooted in heart means. Dr. Dugliss, it's a pleasure to have you on the podcast today.
Thank you, Colette. It's great to be here.
Well, I'm excited for this conversation. We're going to talk about Ayurveda, the chakra system, and human needs. And I'm looking forward to delving deep into the chakra system and its correlation with emotional and human needs. We have discovered or discussed, I should say, the basics of the chakra system, but this is certainly a very interesting topic. And I guess I'd like to start by talking about Ayurveda's understanding of holistic health and the role consciousness plays in our overall health and well-being.
Yeah, that's a wonderful place to start, because without really having the background on consciousness, there's not as much that we can get in terms of understanding the chakras. So I love to talk about the fact that Charak, who was the person who canonized the sayings of Ayurveda. He was the internal medicine specialist who pulled together a lot of the different pieces of knowledge. He talks about consciousness as being central to the purpose of Ayurveda. He talks about how, he says, mind, soul, and body rest upon unity. And that unity he's referring to is the same unity that the modern physicists are discovering, that underlies all of creation. The unified field theories say that everything in creation arises out of this one underlying field of energy and intelligence. And Chark goes on to say that really the purpose is for us to be expanding our consciousness, developing our awareness. And we can't do that without health. We can't do that we can't really know this driving force in life, this driving force of evolution, without knowing consciousness. And so the first thing that I want to communicate is that this notion that we have of our consciousness just being this thing that resides, inside the brain someplace is really a mistake. And these ancient sage physicians knew that. They knew that there was, that consciousness was actually a field. Think of it like you're on an ocean that's pretty rough, and somebody casts this net down so that you can only see the crest of the waves. You don't see the ocean. You'd be, if you didn't know about an ocean, you would be tricked into thinking that, well, there's just these separate waves that kind of pop up here and there. And that's kind of how we look at ourselves, as these separate waves. But actually, our consciousness is part of this underlying field of consciousness out of which all of creation arises. And if we want to create health, we need to understand how creation creates. And that's where this ancient wisdom of Ayurveda is so profound in understanding how things manifest out of this underlying unified field of consciousness.
That's a wonderful way of explaining it. I love that sea, the ocean analogy and the waves. And you mentioned there about the location of the mind and consciousness in our body. And Ayurveda teaches us that the mind is located in the heart and therefore permeates the whole body. Can you talk to us about the significance of this in regards the flow of energy throughout the body and how consciousness permeates the entire body?
So everything in creation arises out of this underlying field of consciousness. And there are different frequencies. And so the lowest frequency creates our physical body. The next higher frequency creates the energetic body that is responsible, say, for the flows, the pranic flows of yoga, the flow of chi in the acupuncture system. That energy that informs the physical body is as a higher vibration of consciousness. The next higher vibration is the mental emotional. And above that is the intuitive causal, and above that is the spiritual. And so the chakras are part of that energetic system. And what most people don't realize is that they have higher harmonics. In other words, they while they're formed in the energetic body, they have harmonics that affect the mental, emotional, that affect the intuitive, that affect the spiritual, and so forth. And this is where the mystic Carolyn Meese talks about, the chakras as not just being centers of energy, but also of information. And I would go even beyond that. It's not just information. It's often patterns of mental, emotional programming that has become subconscious that gets informed into the chakras. And as you explore further with this concept of human needs, you begin to see there's a correlation with the basic human needs and with what takes place in each of the chakras. And so when we talk about the mind being in the heart, first we have to understand mind means a lot of different things to different people.
Yes, indeed.
And so when we talk about the intuitive causal, think in terms of like soul. So that aspect of higher mind, that aspect of the soul is anchored in the heart. And so in that sense becomes the guiding force. When we talk about that aspect of subtle energy, that's part of the pitta dosha, that's called sadhaka. The wisdom or intellect that resides in the heart in sadhaka is really that aspect of are we in alignment with the soul? Are we in alignment with the soul's purpose? And it's that wisdom that really resides there that is actually more intuitive. It's not what we typically think of mental, where we're analyzing. So in that sense, it's the higher mind that's really anchored in the heart.
Okay. And what you talked about there was really like the 5 sheaths or the 5 layers of the body, correct?
Yes, exactly. The koshas or sheaths are really different frequencies of consciousness. And that's what makes up our multidimensional human existence.
And so the most dense layer, if I can say it like that, is the physical body.
Yes.
And then can you repeat the other 4 layers for me, please?
So then there's the energetic, they're this, the names we give, Annamaya kosha, Pranamaya kosha, and so forth. So there's first the physical, then the energetic, and then the mental emotional that in the esoteric systems is called the astral plane. That or the Manomaya kosha, that's the third one. And then this intuitive causal is the Jnanamaya kosha. And that's again where the soul and its impressions are. And this is where one of the things that I incorporate in the school is really a focus on Vedic astrology, because a lot of what's going on that level is what sets up events in the life, that sets up sometimes health challenges. And the ability to know what level the imbalance is coming from is crucial. Because if the imbalance is coming, say, from the mental emotional, and we treat it on the physical without addressing that root cause, we'll get some improvement, but then it'll just come back. And so being able to determine which of the levels of consciousness, which of the frequencies, which of the sheaths or koshas is where an imbalance arises is key to us really resolving things. And if it's on that level of the intuitive causal plane, then that's the beauty of the Vedic astrology, is that there are actually remedies. There are, gemstones and yantras and yagyas and so forth that can operate on that level.
Wonderful. And then the 5th level?
5th level is the spiritual, and this is the level where the architecture for the universe resides. The fundamental laws of nature are all organized here. It's also the level of, the ascended masters, but the way that people can relate to at most, the highest frequency that we tend to hold, if we're not holding absolute infinite frequency or pure consciousness, is the frequency of love. So that really to ground the spiritual frequency, it's the frequency of love, which has tremendous healing power, which again reflects on the importance of the heart.
Absolutely. And so, as you mentioned earlier, accessing these subtle energies, if the physical body is the most dense, and then it gets more refined or more subtle, if I can say that, as it goes through the layers, that we cannot access this consciousness or this intuitive spiritual layers without health. If we are draining energy on some physical or mental imbalance, we won't have the awareness or the consciousness to access these more subtle layers. Is that correct to say?
Yes. I mean, the tool that we have to interact with the physical plane of life is the physical body. Mm-hmm. And that supports, that's what, the ancient sage physicians sat together and cognized this knowledge of Ayurveda because they knew that it was foundational. They saw all the suffering because of the physical, and they wanted a way of countering that suffering, because all of the aims of life are trashed if the physical gets trashed. That's the tool that we have, that we interact with on the physical plane. So yes, it's really important. And there's a reciprocity in the sense that all of these planes do affect the physical, can affect the physical as well.
Right.
And actually, the higher the frequency, the greater the impact. And that infinite frequency of pure consciousness is what we tap into in deep meditation, which is why, why would sitting and closing your eyes and going beyond thought and feeling and sensation, why would that create health? I mean, that's, if you don't have an understanding of consciousness and how it works, it's very difficult to understand. And it's part of the reason that paradigm is not well known. And that's part of the reason why modern medicine hasn't yet really adopted meditation as a standard practice in prevention. And yet there's nothing that has as great an impact on health overall as tapping into that highest frequency, that absolute infinite frequency of consciousness. It's the source of our life force and energy. And that's why you look at, there's a ton of research now out on the health benefits of meditation.
Absolutely. And it is unfortunate that in modern medicine or Western medicine, that there has been this more reductionist movement away from the holistic and the understanding of the mind, body, environment connection. Definitely.
There's a very limited physical biochemical model that creates a lot of what we see today, where most of disease is actually preventable, but we can't figure out how to do it.
Yeah.
And that's because in our culture, as opposed to, places where there's poverty and there's lots of bad water and, other causes for illness, in our modern society, what we have really is so much coming from the mental emotional layer, and again some of the higher imbalances in some of the higher planes that are then manifested. And this is where a lot of Ayurvedic practitioners, they have this great knowledge and they're excited and they go out and then they start practicing and they tell people to do this and that and this and that. And they find out that people don't do it or that there's some block that they can't do it for some reason. And those reasons typically are in that mental emotional sphere. And in that layer of programming that exists in the chakra system. So just to backtrack a little bit, when people can't do what they know that they need to do, there's a reason. What we tend to do is, say, well, they're non-compliant.
Right.
That's not saying anything.
Yes.
And so in one of the things that many years ago that really affected me as I was looking at some of Tony Robbins' stuff, and he was talking about how he would have these great transformations on stage with people where their lives would be changed. And he would bump into some of the people 3-4 years later, and they would have gone back to the old way of being. And it just puzzled him. Mm-hmm. And this is where he started coming to realize that there's these basic human needs. And if a pattern keeps coming back, it's because it meets one of those deeper needs. And as he explained the fundamental needs, I had this insight that each of these basic human needs, they're hardwired in the human being because they relate to the energy centers, these 7 chakras that have correlations in the physical body with the endocrine system. And as we look at each of those, we begin to see where a lot of the subconscious programming resides that creates self-sabotage, that undoes what that people have started, what they want to do, what they might know is good for them to do. So, for example, with the first chakra correlates with the adrenal glands. It's in the base, the tailbone perineum area. And its energy is one that relates to groundedness. It relates to safety and certainty in life. And when a habit that we have meets that need for certainty, like I can always turn to that cigarette to feel better, or I can always turn to that glass of wine to feel better, then it becomes not just a matter of, I read somewhere that it's not good to be taking alcohol, or, in Ayurveda, it decreases ojas and da. It becomes a matter of understanding the basic need and the programming in the chakra that we have to deal with, that we have to reprogram, that we have to alter. And the fascinating thing, and I'll tell you a story one of my mentors told me about his practice. The fascinating thing is when we enliven the chakras with that pure consciousness, when we meditate, often it spontaneously purifies and clears out some of the old programming and stresses that have gone deep into the subconscious mind. And so one of my mentors was practicing in rural Virginia. And he had this patient and came in for his yearly exam, and they were going over everything, and he said, yeah, look, all your lab values look great. Everything on my exam and looked to, when I examined you, there wasn't anything that I found. It looks like you're doing really well. Are you still practicing the meditation that I taught you? And he said, yeah, I am. And he says, well, do you have any questions for me? And the patient said, well, Doc, I keep forgetting to smoke. Is that okay? He was a tobacco farmer. Oh. And it was just part of his life to be smoking. And he had the need for it had been purified through the meditation process. Wow. And so he kept forgetting, and he thought, this is really odd. I better ask about this.
That's fantastic. And that he thought it was a concern that he couldn't sample his product.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is fantastic. And like you said, this the root chakra is all about grounding. And I find in my experience that if people have had an unstable childhood, if our matrix wasn't formed, like I say, our matrix or our foundation wasn't stable, then there can be a lot of concerns here and a lot of issues here.
Yes, and that's because the safety that we find in the beginning of life typically is in the tribe.
Yeah.
For us in the beginning, that's the family and particularly the parents. And if there's instability there, then it does create many later. It actually programs in these typical things like, I don't belong here. I don't have a right to be, all these very, very difficult self-sabotage kinds of programming that's certainly an illusion, but it just is a result of that. And so that becomes something that and even later in teenage years, part of the draw to the peer group and all that is, again, it's the tribe. There's a safety in numbers. There's a feeling of being okay. There's an okayness and a safety that comes from being part of that. And what happens too often when things are not resolved in this area is that there will be habits that we get into that affect our health that are meeting that first chakra need in addition to potentially other needs as well. And so, if your peer group is, into smoking pot, you get into smoking pot. And so it goes.
Mm. Yeah. So it's basically our basic needs. And if they aren't met, can the energy become stagnated here? And does it affect then the other chakras?
Well, for the first three needs, we find a way to meet them, even if they're poor or destructive ways to meet them.
Okay.
And so then that becomes the problem.
That we get stuck in the lower three chakras?
We get stuck in those patterns that are not uplifting. They're not constructive. And therefore it becomes very difficult for us to change. Mm. And, it's really the wisdom of the ancients that they were able to see into this. And this is why, many people are more familiar with the chakras from like yoga but the ancient sage Ayurvedic physicians, they practiced yoga and taught yoga. They practiced Vedic astrology. They practiced the Jyotish. they didn't divide things up. It's kind of I think more of a Western thing these days
to reduce everything.
Compartmentalize. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, that's not Ayurveda. That's yoga. Well, it's all together.
It's one and the same. Absolutely. And you can see the importance, especially of making sure that this root chakra is nourished and that your basic needs are met, because it really is associated with our survival. And also in regards to the identity, our ego, which is, what the body strives to do is keep us relevant.
Yes. So it's hardwired into the structure. The trick is, as we grow, we're designed to grow, and as we grow and develop normally, we will, find increasingly higher frequency ways of having those needs met, so that it becomes less external and we become less ego bound. And just to know, while we think of, fear being part of the first chakra, it's the ego and fear actually are part of the first three chakras.
Okay.
And so we can be, third chakra is in, solar plexus. It tends to be related to significance, to self-worth, and we can be afraid that somebody's going to say something that would make us look less meaningful or less worthwhile in front of a group. And so fear can be part, the more we are identified with those patterns of thought that reside in the first three chakras, the more ego bound we are. And the ego runs on control, and it's trying to, and it uses fear as motivation to try to control things. And so even the second chakra, which has to do with flow, it has to do with the water element, with flow, with pleasure, with the flow of emotion. It's where most of emotion resides, in that water element in the second chakra. And so emotional flow, the ability to flow, and the ability to appropriately contain emotion, that's all part of second chakra. And obviously anxiety and all that, some of the emotions can be very much ego related and ego bound, and also very much focused within that second chakra system. So a lot of the patterns of how we flow or don't flow emotions, the patterns of flow, and with that, the flow of abundance even. It's interesting, the back of the chakras are actually like spheres more than discs. And the back of the second chakra is the lumbar spine. And there was a brilliant physician about 3 decades ago who noticed this pattern of when people, particularly the males in his practice, were under financial stress, they would often present with complaints of low back pain. And it just makes sense. It's the back of the second chakra, and the flow isn't there. The flow of abundance isn't there. The flow of feeling isn't there. And so things are stuck again. As you were saying, when things get stuck, then that's the setup for disease, for suffering. And ultimately, these will, if present long enough, come to affect the physical body.
Right. And with that, how does the lack of flow in these lower three chakras affect the physical body? Is there certain organs correlated to each chakra? Or like you said, the endocrine system, like the root chakras, correlated with the adrenal gland?
Yes, definitely. And so the second chakra is related to the to the sexual glands, the ovaries or the testes. The third chakra is related to the pancreas. And so when third chakra stuff is off, it can affect digestion. When we're depressed, we lose appetite.
Yeah.
We know that in the West. Well, this is like, super basic to an Ayurvedic physician. Of course, they know there's an intimate connection. And so when when each of these, there are patterns of different types of conditions that are common that will result if the chakras are out of balance long enough. And so third chakra, again, relating to digestion. So problems with ulcers, problems with gallbladder disease, for example. These can originate, liver, gallbladder issues can all originate with third chakra energies being out of balance. Now, that's not to say that always happens. And this is, again, why we need to have that insight and wisdom that a practitioner can offer us, in that, you can have gallbladder issues because you're just eating way too much fatty food. Yes. And you're forming gallstones, and it can be a purely physical thing. Or you could be holding on to a lot of resentment because you've been defending your ego and your sense of self-worth, and that resentment can end up as calcifying into a stone. And it could also be that this gallbladder issue is something that is coming from the past, or from hereditary family things that we might see in the Jyotish chart. That's coming from that level. And so it becomes important for us, again, to really understand the consciousness model fully and understand where things are coming from in order to be promoting health and really getting to the root of what is creating an imbalance.
Yeah, it's a fascinating depth of wisdom, really. Layers and layers of wisdom, which makes it a fascinating field to study because it's endless. Absolutely endless. And so if we continue on up the chakras, so we focus now on the lower three chakras. So can you take us through the other chakras, please?
Sure. So the fourth chakra really is like a dual. It's the fulcrum point. So the ego is mainly located in the first three and maybe the lower half of the fourth chakra. We have the personal heart. The fourth chakra is the heart. And so we have the personal aspect, and then we have that universal heart, that universal compassion, that connection to the universal love. And so in that sense, it's the transition from the egoic energy centers to the more spiritual, more universal centers. And that's why the fourth chakra can be so powerful in terms of inner development. Again, love heals all. And it is amazing what the potential is there. I've seen just incredible things. And the fourth chakra, obviously, it being the heart chakra, is going to relate to, in the physical, there's a thymus gland that is right near the heart, and it relates also to cardiovascular issues, heart disease, clearly. And the need that is met there is, the need for connection, for the personal heart and for love for the universal. And the fifth chakra is located in the throat. It relates to the thyroid gland. It is something that is about, actually, second chakra, is this aspect of creativity, but there's a higher way that creation manifests, and manifests through sound. And so the fifth chakra is about that ability to create an influence through our unique voice, and to create in a higher consciousness level through the power of sound. The way this works, there is, particularly after our basic first through fourth chakra needs are met, we start to focus on how we can contribute to society, how we can help uplift society, and how we can create a better world through our unique contribution. The sixth chakra relates to the pituitary gland, and it relates to the third eye, or the ability to see clairvoyantly. And it has to do with wisdom. We also have a need to grow in wisdom as our basic needs get met. The higher need to become wiser, to be able to see into things, to be able to see the truth. It is what this sixth chakra is about. The seventh is the pineal gland, and it relates to our need for transcendence, to go beyond this physical plane. And, you see this, all these things you'll see in different forms. Sixth chakra, people wanting to know the truth, wanting to discover, wanting to learn more, wanting to know more, people continuing to take educational classes, or people really going deep into the knowledge of yoga and the knowledge of enlightenment, wanting to understand deeply. The seventh chakra, again, you'll see this even in kids. They will spin themselves silly.
Yes.
One of Dr. Weil's first books was about, in essence, about this universal craving to go beyond this physical reality. And kids will spin themselves silly because it's natural. We have this need to be able to transcend and to know there's something greater than just this physical world. And that's the seventh chakra need.
It is fascinating to watch kids spinning. Meanwhile, I'm getting nauseous just watching my nieces and nephews do it, but it is fascinating. And they love it.
Yes.
It's amazing talking about these chakras, and it's great to go deep into it here. And I have to say that I have noticed, again, in my experience with the throat chakra, that a lot of women that I work with have, this blockage in this area, or this weakness of, or lack of flow of energy in this area. And I can't help but correlate it to how women have lost their voice for so many decades with, the lack of voting, unable to work, once they got married and things like that. So I feel that there can be, especially for women, a lot of thyroid issues in relation to that, whether it's generational lack of flow or is experienced in their own life, that there has to be this work on this area to communicate their true voice and to learn how to express themselves.
And there is a supportive aspect of the other chakras. And so really supporting the wisdom of women in influencing society. A lot of times the challenges that women will have with the fifth are also rooted in the third, in that they don't have that sense of self, of strong sense of their worth. And, it's been so damaged by so many the structures in society and education and all of this. And so you'll see, in addition, while we've kind of simplified things, you often see there's like a pattern of maybe first, third, and fifth that you need to be supporting multiple chakras simultaneously in order to resolve things.
Yeah, it is really fascinating to look at how history affects our life today and what comes through in regards ancestral healing that still needs to be processed and so on. And if you look at our modern world today, you can see that, we're kind of trapped in this lower three chakras, and we need to move more towards the heart chakra and beyond, into this understanding of our connection to each other and to universal love. And that's hopefully where we're on the path to in this time of change and big upheaval. But you can see how it correlates to the world today.
Very much so.
Yeah, it's fascinating to see. And so it's great to get this information out there to help people, because individually working on this flow of energy through the chakras can have this vibrational effect out through our families, communities, and so on. So can you tell us, Dr. Dugliss, how can we work with the chakras to promote health, to promote better vibration, so we can make our contribution to society? We can feel that we have stability, a grounding, and able to bring our skills, our unique true nature into the world.
Yes, so there are many ways, but the most the most important one, the thing that nourishes and uplifts the vibration of all of the chakras, is a deep form of meditation that allows you to go beyond thought, beyond sensation, beyond feeling, and really go deep into pure consciousness. That's the most valuable place to start. And then working with the chakras through yoga, if you have a very knowledgeable yoga therapist or an Ayurvedic practitioner, is another way. And obviously everything is intertwined. A really well-educated practitioner will also be able to direct you to herbs and foods and routines that will support the chakras in becoming more whole. The cultivation of the heart, a lot of the healing of the chakras can come from cultivation of the heart. That's why I'm very much focused on heart-based meditation, and also on developing this ability to heal using the energy of the heart, and coming to know the 10 facets of the heart that are the foundation for things like radical acceptance or compassion or forgiveness. So that's something that we also teach in our practitioner program, but I also teach through the heart-based meditation training that I do.
Wonderful. I think I just found our next podcast episode, The 10 Facets of the Heart.
Oh, I love it. Yes.
Be a great follow. I just made a quick note of it. And when you talk about like enlivening the chakras, do you use vibration also, like through the mantras, or like the bija mantra for each chakra? So again, the using a style of meditation that takes you all the way to the pure consciousness, to the absolute frequency, is the most efficient. I don't typically will do that. I train patients and my students to be able to send that high vibrational energy and send the energy of the heart
to the chakras. There are some other vibrational techniques, though. First of all, with sound can be very powerful. There's a whole field, another whole Veda, Gandharva Veda, that is the science of sound and music that can be targeted towards each of the chakras. So working with it in that sense, even working with kirtan and those things can, if done consciously, can be something that's very transformative.
And that's the beautiful thing. There are many pathways as well. But like you said, the heart chakra is really the fulcrum between the lower three and the upper three. So working on that area can really make that connection and that flow of energy more intense.
Indeed.
Wonderful. Fascinating conversation, Dr. Dugliss. Thank you so much. And I really appreciate you taking the time to go through this. I think this will be really beneficial for a lot of people. And it's like a deeper level now of understanding healing and going through this energetic layer and really finding the definite root cause, or why you can't make those changes in your life when you know you want to, and what's keeping you stuck in these patterns, and could it be a lack of a flow of energy through the chakras? So fascinating. Thank you so much for your time.
It's my pleasure.
And before I let you go, I'd love for you to tell us more about your offerings, the New World Ayurveda School, and you talked a little bit about your practitioner course and what you focus on. Could you tell us a little bit more about that, please?
Yeah, I think, from our discussion, you can get a sense that our focus in the Ayurvedic health practitioner training is on consciousness as a foundation for learning all the other aspects of Ayurveda. And our focus is very much on learning to assess which level the root cause is. And so we start with pulse diagnosis right away. We get started with learning the Vedic Astrology right away. And so if you're, if you're really interested in this really comprehensive, unified approach to learning Ayurveda, I would recommend you consider our program. We do have an independent study program that you can start at any time. And so you don't have to wait to September for the live online program. All of our programs are online. And I would, if you're just interested in the meditation component and the facets of the heart, we do, retreats and trainings. I'm not sure that I mentioned the heartbasedmeditation.com website is where you would get more information. It's all run together as one word, heartbasedmeditation.com or heartcenteredworld.net, either one.
Wonderful. I will put those in the show notes. And you also offer a discovery call. Is that correct for people who, if they're interested in asking further questions?
Yes, definitely. At the bottom of the New World Ayurveda.com website, you'll see there's a link there to set up a discovery call.
That's great. Wonderful. Well, as I said, please go over to the show notes to get all the links over to the New World Ayurveda School and all those other wonderful offerings. And Dr. Dugliss, it's been an absolute pleasure. And I have noted the 10 facets of the heart for our next chat. That sounds amazing and a good follow-up. And I appreciate all the work you're doing in the world and also taking the time to share this wisdom with us today. Thank you.
Thank you, Colette.
I hope you enjoyed that conversation with Dr. Dugliss, and please check out the show notes for all the links mentioned. And if you think that this episode will be helpful to family or friends, then please share it with them so we can spread this wonderful wisdom. Also in the show notes, you'll find the links to my online services, consultations, at-home cleanses, and educational programs. And if you haven't already subscribed to the podcast, please do so wherever you listen to your podcast. And if you would like to rate and review the podcast, I would really appreciate that. Again, it will help spread this wisdom of Ayurveda and yoga. Thank you so much for tuning in. And until next time, take good care of yourself, be well, and bye for now. Slán go fóill.